Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Thursday. It is June 11th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with the full court press that is coming from the power structure in this country. The political and economic elite in this country are engaged in a full court press to quickly undo the gains of this minor revolution. I call it a minor revolution because that's what it was. Like the American people did rise up, and they are continuing to rise up across this country. It's not over by any measure, but we quickly gained something that the ruling elite is pushing back against. We gained the narrative. We gained the narrative and changed the national conversation to defunding the police across this country. Now, whatever that looks like in practice, I yield to the scholars, to the people who have actually done the academic work around this, who have looked at the various examples across the country, like Camden, New Jersey, who have theorized on it and looked at the data. There are people who can actually tell you what that looks like in practice. But what I can tell you with certainty is that there is a full court press from both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They are both playing their role to ensure that we back away from the narrative of the police state and defunding the police state. Once again, Jim Clyburn of South Carolina is being rolled out as the black face of the police state. He has been sent out to make sure that nobody from the black community can unify the black community around the fact that we need to defund the police because the black community is over-policed by the police state. But Jim Clyburn, being the good representative of the elite that he is being paid to be, has taken to the media networks and basically gone on a tour to let the world know that, and he's attempting to speak on behalf of black folks, right? He said this on MSNBC yesterday.
I am against defund. I do not like that word. The word means what it is. And, I don't have a problem with words like that. Look it up in the dictionary. What does it mean? So if you are talking about reform in the police, then you and I are together. What I'm for is us taking a hard look at our practices and have reforms where we need them. We need the police.
Huh?
We want the police.
Huh?
They have a role to play.
They have a role to play in protecting the power structure that Jim Clyburn has benefited from his entire political career. James Clyburn, South Carolina, has made a career out of being the black face of the ruling elite to ensure that the radical spirit that is in the black community and that has always been in the black community, James Clyburn's job is to make sure that that spirit always remains docile. James Clyburn of South Carolina, his job has always been to put a dignified face on capitulating to the police state that cracks down on his community. He manages to do it without the step and fetchery that you get from people like Candace Owens and the conservatives. He manages to wrap it in something that black people feel is palatable. In other words, he presents this white supremacist police state that cracks down on black people. He presents it in a manner that black people can see as dignified, which makes him a far more insidious, in my opinion, than even the coons on the other side of the aisle. Those people who outright pander for white supremacy. Because what James Clyburn does is convinces the minds of people who know better. But because there's a respected place for elder statesmen in the black community, because we always, we put their pictures on our mantle, right? Because he taps into that Barack Obama wing of the Democratic Party, that well-respected Democrat that makes you feel like you're doing something, but at the end of the day, all you're doing is protecting the white supremacist structure, the power structure that the police state, the policing forces across this country are the brute forces of. The police carry out, the police across this country carry out the agenda of the ruling elite, which is a white supremacist structure. And Jim Clyburn is right here, right now, defending them at all costs. So the fight is different now. The fight is different because they saw they lost the narrative. They pulled the cops back. You don't have cops beating everybody in the streets anymore. They saw that they lost the entire nation. And so now the fight is, well, we need the police. We want the police. The police have a role to play. I want to ask Jim Clyburn. Let me ask you a serious question, my friend. How many police officers are patrolling your gated community? How many police officers are patrolling your wealthy community? How many times do you have an encounter? How many times have you been pulled over in your community? Because you live in a wealthy enough community, a community that has enough resources. I don't care what color it is. Your community could be predominantly black, but if it has enough resources, it has the ability and the power to tell the cops to stay the hell away. That's just what it is. A cop can come to your neighbor. I don't care if you live in a predominantly black neighborhood, but if it's wealthy enough, cops know better. They know their place. And so what do? You send those cops to patrol poor communities. And so when you say we need the police, we want the police, what you're not talking on behalf of the average black person who doesn't have $400 in their account. When you say we want the police and we need the police, you're speaking on behalf of the ruling elite of which you are a member in good standing. This is the battlefield right now. And so right now, people like Jim Clyburn have been released all over the country to go out and make sure that that radical spirit that is naturally in the black community is satiated. That the radicalness that we've seen over the last 2 weeks turns docile. And he does so by trying to leverage the power of the civil rights movement. One thing I could tell you, though, for sure is that even if I don't outlive these people, you will outlive these people. This generation of leadership that weaponizes the civil rights movement on behalf of this political power structure of which John Lewis is a part of. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Barack Obama is certainly a part of it. Jim Clyburn is a part of it. They all hearken back to the civil rights movement when in reality they are doing nothing. They are literally doing nothing in this present moment to change the material conditions of black people. Not only the material conditions, but the safety of black people, because they're pandering now about we need to take a hard look. Let's take a hard look at how we do policing. My nigga, we've been looking hard at the police for a long time since they cracked Rodney King's skull. I mean, how long are you going to take a look at this? How long does it take? Because we've done studies. And every time we do studies, what ends up happening is you pour more resources into the police agencies. And now they have even more money to crack our skulls with, to have their own little secret surveillance state, to have their own secret little operatives. This is a police state. This entire country is a police state, and we continuously pour millions and billions of dollars into police forces across this country, and it's being currently protected by the Negro shield of the likes of Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. The Democratic Party, and again, I don't apologize for calling out the truth wherever I find it. It's just so disappointing that in a season where we should all literally be able and energetic and enthusiastic about taking down Donald Trump, the Democratic Party is trying to institute policies that are going to, we just got to call them out. We have no choice but to call them out. There's a letter from 30 Democrats. According to my friend Corey Robin, from journalist from New York, he's saying not all of them are blue dog Democrats. Basically saying a letter to Nancy Pelosi concerned about the debt and discussing the possibility of making changes to Social Security. This is what he reported. He said 30 Dems, not all of them blue dogs, signed a letter warning that the debt is getting too high, recommending a commission to deal with Social Security and Medicare. And if you follow the references, invoking the spirit of Simpson Bowles, which is not good, according to Corey Robbins. Here's a letter signed by those 30 Democrats. It says, "Dear Speaker Pelosi and Leader McCarthy, we, a bipartisan group of representatives, remain committed to fighting the pandemic and the economic downturn to help the American people through this hardship. The unemployment rate is nearly 15% and GDP could fall as much as 30%. We must confront the economic fallout from this crisis head on. As the crisis recedes and our nation recovers, we cannot ignore the pressing issue of the national debt, which could do irreparable damage to our country." They went on and said, "We therefore respectfully request that further pandemic response legislation include provisions for future budget reforms to ensure we confront these issues when the economy is strong enough." Let me just pause right there. First of all, first and foremost, why is it? I know the answer, you know the answer, but I have to pose the question. Why is it the only people in Washington, D.C. who are ever concerned with the budget are Democrats and Republicans when Democrats are in power? Democrats constrain themselves when they're in power. Republicans constrain Democrats when they're in power. And ultimately, what that does is defund any possibility of having expanded social safety net programs. In fact, not only are we not expanding the programs when we should be expanding the programs, we're currently entertaining the idea of contracting them. Social Security, Medicare. And they try to wrap it in language of, well, when the economy is strong again. This is the game, man. This is the game that is played on us every so many years. It's like a cycle. The Republicans come in and spend an inordinate amount of money on military spending, on wars, on tax breaks, tax cuts, and then they crash the economy. And Democrats come in and they are the fiscal conservatives. And they come in and they gut welfare. They gut all the safety nets, and they continue to expand right-wing economic legislation in this country. So what do we end up having at the end of the day? We have a country that absolutely serves the economic best interests of the elite, period. End of conversation. And they don't want to spend a dime on the unwashed masses. It's too much to ask for us to have an expanded Medicare program and Medicaid program in the midst of a pandemic without us having Democratic Congresspeople concern troll us about the budget. No one has a problem as we create trillions of dollars. We're printing trillions of dollars and giving it to corporations and to markets to keep it solvent. Yet we are going to nickel and dime America over the only safety nets that we have. That is the game. And we play this game all the time. And you know who else is a part of this game? Joe Biden. Joe Biden has, this is Joe Biden language. And so I need people to see clearly. I get it. I understand. I'm with you. We got to get rid of Donald Trump. But I need everyone to be perfectly sober about the fact that what's getting ready to replace Donald Trump is economically detrimental to the working class. So your options in America, your two-party system options, are either go with a full-on fascist who's willing to bring down a full military dictatorship and hurt the working class, or people who will give you the nice illusion as if you have true democracy and you have some wokeness and you don't have as much racism, or at least public racism, and hurt the working class. Those are your options. Protected by black, white, every other color that you could think of. This is a bipartisan, multi-ethnic coalition of the ruling elite that want to ensure that we give every dime we possibly can to the rich, the corporations, to the military, but not a dime to the people. We cannot stop the protesting. We cannot. Whether it's protesting directly in the streets or whether it's raising our voices on social media, we have to or whether it's protesting through our vote, whatever form your protest comes in, we have to let the ruling elite of this country, of which both parties are full participants. Don't think for a minute that the $150 million that Nancy Pelosi is worth does not give her good standing in the ruling elite of this country just because she's a Democrat and just because she ostensibly opposes Donald Trump. When she does not leverage her political power to actually hold Donald Trump accountable. This may be difficult for some people to hear in this extended audience that we have now, but ask yourself the question: the most powerful woman in this country, leading 1/3 of this government with the power to hold the president accountable, Why is it when the president of the United States sent out troops, military troops in civilian cities, in cities across this country to crush protesters, why is it that her only response was to hold up a Bible and to send a sternly worded letter? We have to understand the score. We have to understand what we're fighting against. We're not just fighting against the ruling elite in the Republican Party. We're also fighting against the ruling elite in the Democratic Party, both of whom are more than happy to take every dime of wealth generated in this country and give it to corporations and give us nothing except for the police cracking our skulls in the streets. Yep. All right, let's talk about this very briefly because I know this is exactly what Donald Trump likes to do, and this is exactly who he is. But Donald Trump is having his first rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Juneteenth. That is June 19th. And for those of you who don't know, June 19th represents it is a holiday for Black folks. It's a national holiday, but it's definitely a Black holiday where we celebrate. We commemorate the end of slavery in Texas. Texas was the last state to get the Emancipation Proclamation, and they got it June 19th. Whereas the rest of the country started getting it after January 1. So Donald Trump has picked two venerated moments in African-American history, Black history, to have his first Klan rally. And because make no mistake about it, what Donald Trump does is he rallies the worst of the Republican Party, the worst of America. When he gathers them together, it is a celebration of white supremacy. It always has been. It always will be. And the fact that he's using this day, the day that is hallowed and respected and revered in the Black community, and doing it in Tulsa. As you recall, the Tulsa race riots is what they like to call it, but it was really a massacre. There was no rioting. The rioting was done by the police, the white police, and the white citizens who went through and killed and destroyed Black Wall Street. So Trump knows exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it to rub salt into the wounds of Black people across this country, as well as to rev up his base because, well, the cruelty is the point. That is what they love to revel in. It's being written, the speech that he's given is going to be also written by the white nationalist in chief. Donald Trump is the white supremacist in chief. Stephen Miller, his advisor, is the white nationalist in chief. And he's going to write this speech. So this is nothing more than throwing red meat to his base. This is exactly what it is. I don't care, to be quite honest with you. I think it's important for us to note. I think it's important for us to not necessarily discuss it, but have it on the record that we understand exactly what this man is doing. But the fact is that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it for the purposes of irritating and agitating Black people across this country, as well as revving up his base because, like I said, and I will continue to repeat the words of Adam Seward, the cruelty is the point. But there's something a little more insidious that's going on underneath it, and that is the attempt. There are steps to this. There are degrees to this thing. This is the attempt of Donald Trump to align Blackness in America with white supremacy. He's going to use the likes of Ben Carson and Candace Owens and I forget the name of those Black preachers who always running behind him sniffing his ass. Daryl something. I forgot the name of those preachers. But he's going to use these Black faces and he's going to prop them up and say, look, these are my African Americans. These are the people. So of course I'm not racist, even though everything that I stand for, everything that I say, and everything that I do, like cutting down the number of redlining prosecutions from the Justice Department by 80%. Everything that he says, everything that he does, his policies are drenched in white supremacy, but he's going to put a Black face on it. And that's because what America wants more than anything out of this moment. And again, I said that there are levels to this thing. I'm going to go through all the levels and show you how Democratic Black people are complicit with this, but we'll get to that in a minute. What white America, what white racist Americans would love to have in this moment, not just the individual people, but the collective system would have at this moment would be black people who do not challenge the power structure in this country, but who sign off on the power structure in this country. Because if they can get black people to sign off on the power structure in this country, then you have completely neutralized the one radical element in this country that can bring the power structure to its knees because of our history and because of what this country has done to us. Black people are inherently radical in this country because of our plight in this country. And so the most valuable thing that the powerful elite around this nation could get access to would be enough black faces to sign off on the current power structure, which Bill O'Reilly, and I played it a million times, I'm not going to play it again, described as the power structure of this country, America being run by white Christian men. So if they can get enough black faces to protect the white Christian male power structure in this country, well, then you've neutralized the one radical element that they have outstanding. It's like unfinished business. You can't really move forward with this right-wing authoritarian military state when you have black people who are still demanding liberation and justice. That's a major problem for the powerful ruling elite in this country. That's a significant problem because when we call for liberation and justice, we call for liberation and justice for all people, for people who are not white, for people who are not male, for people who are not Christian, for people who otherwise go completely against the grain of what is acceptable in this country. So the most valuable thing that the ruling elite could ever get hold of are people who are black, who are Muslim, who are, who can be the tokenized face of white supremacy. So what Donald Trump is actually going to do is, I guarantee you, he's going to try to wrap he's going to walk the tightrope of having pro-black language with white supremacist tropes. That's what Stephen Miller is working on right now. How can I sound like I am pro-black? Well, one, I'm going to surround myself with a whole bunch of black folks. But then two, also never betray the fundamental power structure of this country. That is the role of Candace Owens. That is the role of Ben Carson. That is the role of Diamond and Silk. That is the role of all of their stepping fetchineers who go around this country putting a black face on their white supremacy. Let's go down to another level. There's another level of protection, and I've already covered it in this episode, but I want to make sure that you understand that I understand, that you understand that it's not just conservatives who do this, because we have people who call themselves progressive when in fact their political ideology is deeply rooted in conservatism. Let's be real. Let's be real. There is not enough difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party for us to call them two different parties. And so when you have people like Jim Clyburn who actively fight against the liberation movement that's happening in this country right now, people like Jim Clyburn who use his power to protect the powerful at the expense of black communities who will still be brutalized by the police across this country because he doesn't want to defund them. When you see people like him, you have to realize he's just a different category, but doing the same thing. He is protecting the power structure of this country, and he's doing it on behalf of the people, of the black people who ostensibly believe that they're woke. But at the end of the day, what is being protected? The white, male, Christian power structure, of which the police state is the brutish force that is unleashed anytime people firmly oppose that power structure. And I don't have to say it, but I will for anyone who missed it. At the core of that power structure is not only political power, but gross, vast amount of economic power. The rich, the ruling elite, are protected by both parties. And in this case, both parties have black faces that they will prop up to neutralize the radicalism that is naturally in the blood of black people across this country. And the thing is that that's intentional, right? The thing is that we have been left with a certain, the hardest thing to do is to look at your heroes and realize that your heroes are villains. That's a story arc for your ass. I don't know many stories like that, but that's a story arc. When people, hell, that's the story of my life. That's the story of my goddamn life. Now that I think about it, people that you admire or you admired, past tense, is to look at them and realize that the reason they have the platforms that they have is because of the job that they do and the role that they facilitate on behalf of white supremacy. And what happens is enough time passes between their transgression and the present John Lewis, the way that John Lewis won his seat here in Atlanta. If you haven't, I'm not going to go through it because we're almost out of time for the public episode, but look it up, how John Lewis won his seat here in Atlanta. But enough time passes and enough people rally behind the power that he now has. And enough people begin making excuses because of the power that he has. And he becomes venerated. And everybody, Jim Clyburn, loves these leaders because they are a great representation of blackness. And it has the stain. It has this scent of civil rights and liberation. But at the core, what they are doing is protecting the power in this country that always has to brutalize blackness, because black folks, we just don't give a shit. We understand what this country really is. And so you look at your heroes and you're like, wow, you're actually not a hero. You actually are doing, and even if you want to forgive the flashpoint, right? If you want to forget about how they amassed their power, and you want to forget about their role in the 94 crime bill, and you want to forget about how they have continuously used their own political power instead of for benefiting the community, they've done it to their own self-benefit. You can look at what they're actively doing right now and the role that they play in making sure that this country never moves towards a more egalitarian society, taxing the rich, making sure that we have safety nets of which black people would be the greatest beneficiaries. So if you want to forgive and forget what happened in the past, you can't ignore the role that these black leaders are facilitating right now today. But it's difficult for black folks to do that because that means we have to look, and white folks don't worry about it. You got plenty of people in that category. Don't trust me. You're not, y'all ain't that radical. I mean, we fighting against y'all cousins, you know what I mean? But it's difficult for black folks because that requires that we look with a clear eye at people that we once considered to be heroes, Barack Obama, and realize that they are complicit with the powerful in this country, and they are doing their part to neutralize black radicalism.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
If you've ever wondered why it is I can say what the hell I want to say on this show and never have to worry about being canceled, it's because of these people right here. Very special welcome to our newest patrons. GH, I see you, my friend. Thank you for becoming a patron. Hunter Young, thank you for becoming a patron. Emily Flanders Yonkers, thank you for becoming a patron. Bounce. John Randall, Tom Wenzel, Kenya Watts, BF, Big Fart, I see you. Okay, I'll say it on air. Thank you for becoming a patron. Sean O'Brien, Alex Castron, Darb Shank, thank you for becoming a patron. Curtis Carl, Justin Matthew, Will Jones, and Jamie Magdans, thank you for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family that affords me the opportunity to speak truth to power, whether the powerful like it or not, by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, unedited interviews, and none of the corporate advertisements like you're going to get right here.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
All right. Let's go. One more story real quick before we close the the public session, the public show out. Remember, you can get full access to the full show by going to patreon.com/the BPD show. Here's a clip of General Mark Milley. He is he's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he's essentially apologizing for the role that he played last week in Donald Trump's Bible photo op. Listen in, and then we'll discuss.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it. We who wear the cloth of our nation come from the people of our nation, and we must hold dear the principle of an apolitical military that is so deeply rooted in the very essence of our.
Okay, it cuts off there, but you get the point. So twofold. I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, that's good. That's thank you for apologizing, but we are a police state. We are a military. Our military is not apolitical under any circumstances. Our military exports capitalism abroad and tears down anyone who dares challenge capitalism. The number one national security, as observed by our military's actions and our policies abroad, the number one policy of this country, the number one national security interest in this country is maintaining capitalism abroad. So while I appreciate the sentiments of it, and it is a good gut check domestically against Donald Trump, it's still malarkey, in the words of Joe Biden, because our police state, our militarized state, is most certainly political. It is not apolitical. So just so that we're clear. So there's both sides to this. Yeah, both sides of this. It's a good clip. Glad that they did that. But don't ever be fooled into thinking that our military is apolitical. Why do you think most people in your life who are part of the military, people who are a part of, matter of fact, I guess I did not do this whole thing for the public show. I did all this in the patrons episode yesterday. You really do miss out if you really, really do miss out if you're not a patron. But yesterday, I mean, we really just logically walked through this. If you look at the police in this country and you look at their voting, the police in this country are overwhelmingly Republican, right-wing, conservative. Same in terms of the military, right? And why does that matter? That's because it is impossible for these institutions that are made up by individuals who have deeply rooted ideological beliefs to itself be apolitical. I fumbled that a little. Let me say it again. It's impossible for these institutions who carry out the police state in our cities and the imperialism abroad to be apolitical when the individuals that make up those institutions are highly political and highly ideological. Not just that, not just the sum total of their individual parts that makes them ideological, but because of what they protect and what they execute. They protect capitalism, which is ideological. I'm sorry, it's political. You can't look at capitalism in this country and not realize that it is political. So anyway, it's important that we realize that these institutions are political. They are right-wing, and they are, as far as the police, they are paramilitary organizations that siphon off billions of dollars every single year, and they hand it off to right-wing ideologies, and they hand it off to people who support right-wing ideologies. Same thing with the military. Think about the people in your life that are military and that they are military and they are police. It doesn't matter if they're black. It doesn't matter if they're white. It doesn't matter if they're Hispanic. It doesn't matter if they're Asian. It doesn't matter what they are. The majority of them are going to hold and espouse right-wing beliefs. And that matters. All right. A whole lot more. That was yesterday's patrons, a little bit from the patrons. There's so much more that we do on the patrons episode. Patreon.com/the BPD show. For everyone who can't come, listen, share, like, and subscribe. Tell somebody about the show. And thank you so much for being a beautiful audience. I will see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.